Joining me now is Alexi McCammon, MSNBC political analyst and host of the podcast In Sync with Alexi, and Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent for Vanity Fair and MSNBC contributor. Good to see you both. So, Alexi, you first. We may have narrowly avoided the shutdown, but how big of a problem is this still for congressional Republicans and for Trump? I mean, does it show anything about limits of Trump's power and maybe what the next couple of years of total GOP control will look like?
Yeah, Alex, I mean, I think that we all remember the constant chaos of the first Trump presidency and how congressional Republicans will run in circles to try to get whatever he wants done. Though, as you just alluded to, a number of Republicans defied him yesterday in not going along with the plan that he wanted to eliminate the debt ceiling, which is, of course, something he wants them to do so that he doesn't look like he has a bad legacy or a stain on his presidential legacy if he has to deal with it when he's president. But as long as Elon Musk continues to sort of operate as a shadow president, someone who is not elected, someone who has no governing experience, no experience writing or trying to pass legislation, they are going to run into walls and problems like this because it's hard to tell what President-elect Trump wants half the time. It's even harder to figure out how to make those things happen when you're also taking into account someone like Elon Musk, who is now using his platform X to sort of whip the vote. He is using X users as sort of his barometer for what will pass and what should be included in bills, when that is not the way the government works, or at least it's not how it has worked historically.
Well, interestingly, Molly, Politico called this a wake-up call for Trump on the limits of his power, saying some Republicans are concerned that he won't be able to get as much done as he hoped because he's focused on the wrong thing, like the debt ceiling. Trump and the GOP are going to have a big challenge in the next few months, confirming his nominees, trying to implement his policy priorities, and then now another budget deadline in March. How treacherous could this first 100 days be?
Well, I think one of the big problems Trump has is that he ran for president on this idea that inflation was a real problem. People were really mad about inflation, and that he was going to make things cheaper, right? Because there's a real problem. People were really mad that they went to the grocery store and things were, significantly more expensive. So now Trump has got to make things cheaper. But I'm not convinced that he has a real plan for making things cheaper, except tariffs, which would ultimately be inflationary.
So he's also walking the whole thing back. You heard him say, right, once the numbers go up, it's hard to bring them down. And then someone asked him, if you don't do that, if you don't make good on your campaign promise, will you think that you've had a failed element of your presidency? He goes, no, I don't think so.
Right. And there are a lot of other things like that he's promised, like mass deportation. And remember, yes, he did win, and he won the popular vote, which for a Republican president is not necessarily, what always happens. But here's the thing. Some of these things are not, easy to pass, normal things. Mass deportation, wildly expensive, morally reprehensible, and going to cause you big problems, and also wildly inflationary. So I do think he's got a real problem there.
Okay. Alexi, what lessons can Democrats take from this time or this around and any leverage that they might have? House Republicans are going to have an even smaller of a majority than they've had this term. We got 34 Republicans who voted no on this CR. If Democrats had left them to their own devices, it wouldn't have passed. Can that provide some protection against the more extreme policies Republicans might want to pass?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen Congressman Jeffries, Leader Jeffries, talking about how he feels that the Democratic caucus has stood up to Trump and congressional Republicans already. I think what's really fascinating is that Speaker Mike Johnson is giving away the secret by telling NBC and others that he basically asked Elon Musk if he wanted to take his job. Right. I mean, the man is already signaling that he's not loving having the seat that he's in, and that he's even having multiple headaches from his colleagues. And so I think that Democrats are watching this, and they're seeing not only do they have leverage from the policy side, but the personnel side as well, because as congenial as he might be, we saw how Kevin McCarthy before him was pushed out. And we know that come January 3rd, Republicans will be having yet another fight in which they could very well try to replace Johnson. And so I would expect Jeffries and others to try to use that as leverage, too.
So, Molly, Representative Jerry Connolly, who was just elected to the top minority spot on the powerful House Oversight Committee, spoke to MSNBC yesterday about Elon Musk's role in killing the original budget deal. Here's that.
This is unprecedented. It's dangerous. He is riddled with conflicts of interest. He's kind of the original American oligarch, a big word, but it means a rich guy who's unaccountable, who was elected to nothing, who is basically overshadowing the actual president-elect of the United States, Donald Trump. I think that's a really troubling development for everybody. It's not funny. It's actually quite serious.
So when it comes to why Musk got involved, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro sent a letter to congressional leaders Friday noting the original bill included restrictions on tech investments in China and accused Musk of derailing the deal to, quote, protect his wallet and the Chinese Communist Party at the expense of American workers, innovators, and businesses. How often, Molly, can we expect him to upend critical government operations for personal gain?
Well, this is the reason that we have all of these ethics laws that are, Trump world pretty much thumbed their nose at the last time, though some of them were still, people still were able to abide by some of them. But yes, sure. And that's why we don't have people in the federal government who also work in business, right? And that's probably why we shouldn't have members of Congress allowed to trade stocks, right? Because we should have people who serve in the federal government who are working for the people, the taxpayers, and not for themselves. But certainly it's a conflict. And certainly even if it's not, even if he's not acting that way to get something, it creates the appearance of a conflict, which is ultimately just as problematic. And I think that, look, the whole idea of having an unelected billionaire run the government when he did not run for president is riddled with problems, moral implications, and ultimately, I think I don't know how long this relationship can last. But I also think, he has such a sort of very limited understanding of American government. I mean, he was bragging that this bill was weighed less than it did before. I mean, that's not a metric in which we judge legislation.
Well, among the things that got cut, Alexei, again, by the resolution pushed by Trump and Musk, and it failed, it cut funding for a bipartisan childhood cancer research program. That cost $190 million. That's a relatively small amount compared to the overall budget. Is this the kind of government efficiency we're going to see Musk and his DOGE department try to implement?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You remember Elon Musk saying not that long ago, oh, Americans are going to have to get used to living within their means. It makes me feel so angry even recalling him saying that, because it is such a joke. But not only that, you were just talking about their business conflicts. There was another measure in there that Senator Ted Cruz has been pushing that would force tech companies to remove so-called revenge porn, which are, explicit images that were shared privately and consensually, and then someone decides to share them without that person's consent all over the internet. It ruins people's lives. It is devastating. And guess what? That was taken out too. And there's a lot of revenge porn that is prolific on sites like X and Truth Social. And so you have to ask yourself, what do these people care about? Is it literally just, as Molly was saying, the so-called weight of these things and the numbers and the bottom line? Or do they have values and morals that are backing up what they're pushing for and what they're pushing against?
Speaking of values, at least the Senate brought back that childhood cancer research, and that did get into the final bill. So thankfully, we can report that. Alexei and Molly, always love to have you on. I'll see you again soon. Thank you.